It's the worst kept secret in football that Real Madrid want to sign Kylian Mbappe. But when you try to sign a player like Kylian Mbappe, it can have an impact on your squad building. And that is what today's video is all about. Welcome to Sensible Transfers. What we're going to do is we're going to take a squad, we're going to look for the weaknesses in that squad, and then we're going to suggest sensible solutions in the transfer market. We're not interested in rumour, we are not interested in conjecture. All we want is sensible solutions on the pitch. So with that in mind, let's take a look at Real Madrid. Now, in the last few Real Madrid sensible transfer videos, we focused a lot of our time on the central midfield area because we've always been asking the question, how do you evolve that midfield of Kroos, Modric and Casemiro? And actually, it looks as though Real Madrid have managed to do that. So they've already strengthened the ranks in bringing in Camavinga and Tchouaméni, and then this summer they brought in Jude Bellingham, who seems to be the final piece of that puzzle. And on top of this, Real Madrid have managed to extend the contract of another few players. So Kroos, Modric and Ceballos have all renewed their contracts for a little bit longer, which means that they'll all be available as well. And it's also worth remembering, Fede Valverde isn't just a wide option, he can also drop into the midfield and help out as well. So in terms of the central midfield situation, Real Madrid are really well catered for. So with the central midfield all sorted out, in this video I'm going to talk about striker, winger and fullback options for Real Madrid. Now that may sound a little bit weird because, as we know, Real Madrid are really interested in Kylian Mbappe. So why am I recommending striker options? So this summer saw a really monumentous occasion for Real Madrid because Karim Benzema left the club after well over a decade of playing for them and left a big vacuum in the number 9 slot. And so far the club have only brought in Joselu from Espanyol, a relegated La Liga side, to fill that void. Now the two options that they have here now are Joselu and Alvaro Rodriguez, who is a youngster coming through. This is simply not good enough to challenge both in La Liga but also the Champions League as well. So the big question is, how do you solve this problem? Now Real Madrid have been linked with some really elite 9s this window. We've got Victor Osimhen here, Lautaro Martinez, and then obviously Harry Kane, one of the best number 9s available in the market this summer. And this is a player who Carlo Ancelotti really wanted but was dissuaded from signing by Florentino Perez because he felt as though Kane would just cost too much this window. But it looks like none of these options are being pursued by Real Madrid, which raises the question, why? And the answer to that question emerges when you think about Mbappe's contract situation. Now, Kylian Mbappe has 1 year left on his contract at PSG, and it is a very lucrative contract. He's set to earn around 60 million euros in salary if he sees out his contract. And if he signs for Real Madrid as a free agent, he's also expected to pick up a really sizable signing on fee. So much so that the Athletic's Mario Cortegana estimates that staying next season at PSG will be worth around 260 million euros to Kylian Mbappe. All of which means that Mbappe is unlikely to arrive at Real Madrid until next season, which probably explains why none of these players are really being considered by Real Madrid. Because if they were to bring in an elite player into that 9 slot, they would then have to move them on after a year, and it could cause them problems with their squad building. But Real Madrid still need more coverage in the number 9 spot, and so maybe a short-term solution is in order. Maybe the best option for them is to bring in a player at the end of their career just as a holdover for the next 12 months. And there are a few options available on the market right now. For example, Roberto Firmino has come to the end of his time at Liverpool and is moving on. He's a perfect Benzema replacement because he can play on the final line, he can drop in and help out. He's creative, but also a goal scorer as well. But the problem with Firmino is that he has been linked to a move to Saudi Arabia, and that could be a really nice final contract of his career, so it might be difficult for Real Madrid to get him over for just one more season. Another option is Wissam Ben Yedder, who's been playing at AS Monaco. He's still got a year left on his contract, but he's in the same sort of situation as Firmino. You can maybe induce him to come across for a year and fill that position as well. But the Real Madrid president, Florentino Perez, has said that they are not going to make any more moves in the transfer window in that area. And so Real Madrid are either going to have to deal with this lack of depth in the 9 spot or solve it from within their own squad. Now, the solution that Real Madrid used last season to this problem, whenever Benzema wasn't available, was to move Rodrigo inside and use him as a false 9. And this is definitely a really workable option for them. The problem here then is that by moving Rodrigo inside, it's starting to look very obvious how thin Real Madrid look in those wide areas. They've had Asensio leave on a free recently, they've had Eden Hazard leave on a free as well. And given the fact that Valverde is probably the immediate backup to Luka Modric, this solution starts to look quite constricting quite quickly. Now, you could use Brahim Diaz in this role, but he's not really a winger and wouldn't be first choice in any of these roles anyway, and so that's probably not the best solution. And so with all that in mind, it's starting to look like Real Madrid are in real need of bringing in an elite winger who can play on the right in particular, but also can cover on the other side as well. Obviously, Vinicius Jr. is going to be starting whenever injury. He's fit, but there's no backup behind him as well. So what we're looking for is a winger who's going to be strong on the right, but can also fill in on the left. Now, this is Real Madrid Football Club that we're talking about here. And for Real Madrid Football Club, a sensible transfer is the most elite transfer. And therefore, the name that I'm going to suggest for this winger position is Leroy Sané of Bayern Munich. Now, you all know who Leroy Sané is. He's played at Manchester City. He's played at Bayern Munich. He's a really, really elite winger. Great ball carrier, has really incredible pace, is able to get in behind back lines and score and create goals. That is exactly what Real Madrid are looking for. And unsurprisingly, the data backs that up because we've got green bars, green bars, green bars, green bars, green bars all the way down. Let's not look at the defensive side of things too much. But there is a problem with Leroy Sané, and that is that he is left-footed. Now, you can obviously play wingers inverted, play them on the side of their weaker foot. But with Leroy Sané, because so much of his game is built around getting in behind defenses and actually taking shots on goal, it makes more sense for him to actually run in on the left-hand side, because from the left-hand side, his stronger shooting leg means that he can shoot back across the goal, back across the goalkeeper into the bottom corner. Whereas if he's coming in from the right-hand side, he has to readjust his momentum to turn his hips so that he can then curl the ball into the far post as well. So Leroy Sané is better suited to the left-hand side, even though he can play on the right, but obviously he's not going to be competing with Vinicius Jr. for that slot. And on top of that, Leroy Sané is at Bayern Munich. He has 2 years left on his contract, and that means that he would be really, really expensive. So maybe the better option is to get someone a little bit cheaper who could actually suit that right-hand side better. And that player for me is Jeremy Doku of Rennes. Now, Jeremy Doku is a right-footed winger, and he has quite a different profile to Leroy Sané, because where Leroy Sané is all about direct attacking, using his pace to get in behind, Jeremy Doku is a bit more of a technical winger. And so what we get from Doku is, rather than using pace to get around players, he's going to use technicality, which means that he's going to look quite different to what Sané is doing, because he's going to be able to retain possession of the ball, particularly in tight spaces, and that means that he can actually operate in more central areas as well. Now, for Rennes, he's tended to operate on the right-hand side, but he can play on the left as well. He can go around fullbacks either way, and when he gets to the byline, he can cross with his weaker foot as well. So he is going to offer an all-round profile for both sides, and that makes him really valuable as well for Real Madrid. And then if we look at the data, we can see that he's a really elite player. You can see that he's great all the way up the board in terms of the in-possession stuff. Although it is worth caveating that these green bars that you can see here only represent Doku compared to midfielders. He's obviously a winger, so if we were to compare him against other wingers, these bars would be slightly depressed. But if we look at the actual values of the numbers that he's putting up, he's still clearly a very elite player. For example, he's putting up nearly double the amount of progressive carries that Leroy Sané is putting up, which makes sense given that he is a technical carrier of the ball. And so because of all that, Jeremy Doku is our sensible transfer for Real Madrid's right winger. But there is another area of the Real Madrid squad which could prove to be a problem in the near future, and that is the right back area. Now, if you look at our squad map here, you can see that Real Madrid do have 3 options in the right back area, but there is caveats here because Odriozola was on loan at Fiorentina all of last season, and the club do want to move him on this summer if possible. Now, that leaves Lucas Vázquez and Dani Carvajal as the 2 options here, but the problem is these are basically the same profile of player. They're both right backs, they're both 31. They're arriving towards the end of their time at Real Madrid. So this clearly represents a problem in Real Madrid's squad right now, but it's unlikely that they're going to be able to move either of these 2 players on this window. And so the best solution here is to bring in a young player who can develop behind these 2 so that when they move on, he's ready to step into the space that opens up. And so with all of that in mind, we've got a few young Spanish fullbacks that Real Madrid could bring in to develop for the future. And the first one is Arnaud Martinez, who is playing at Girona this season. Now, Arnaud Martinez is one of the standout young Spanish fullbacks in La Liga this season, and there's no question that he would be able to make that step up to the elite level. But there are questions about his profile in particular, because Martinez is a bit more of a technical build-up fullback. You'll find him in his own third, helping his team to progress the ball down the field, but you won't see him getting into the final third and generating chances as much as a team like Real Madrid might like. And so because of that, I'm going to focus on a different fullback, and that is Ivan Fresneda of Real Valladolid. Now, there's a couple of things about this transfer that makes it really suitable for Real Madrid. The first one is that Valladolid were relegated into the Segunda Division, which means that Fresneda will be available fairly cheaply. The other good thing about Fresneda is that he's a really nice profile for Real Madrid because he is a 2-way fullback. That means he's good in his own third and he's good in the opposition third as well. And that shows up quite nicely in the data. So defensively, we can see that in a lot of these metrics, he's in the 90th percentile. So clearances, blocks, tackles won, a really solid defensive fullback. He would also be a really good option going forward for Real Madrid as well, particularly because he's a very good crosser of the ball. Now, if we look at the data here, we can see that the volume of crosses that he's putting in for Valladolid is only just over the halfway mark. But it is worth remembering that Valladolid were were relegated, and so if you were to put him into the Real Madrid team, this volume of crosses would go up, and because his crossing is so good, that would mean that there would be a huge upside for Madrid. Now there is one other option to solve this problem, and that is Vinicius Tobias. Now Tobias is a fullback who was on loan to Real Madrid's B team from Shakhtar Donetsk. He's been around for a couple of seasons on loan with an option to buy, but the club is trying to extend that loan for another year, and so he could be an option to come in behind these other two right backs and slowly develop, and they could buy him at the end of the season if they wanted. But let's make Fresneda our sensible transfer for the right back position, and here is what Real Madrid would look like after our sensible transfer picks. Obviously Fresneda would be playing behind Carvajal here, but the idea would be in the future he would become a solid right back for Real Madrid. And so Real Madrid's transfer window is all about one player who won't actually be on the pitch this season, that is Kylian Mbappe. And this suggests that Real Madrid are happy to throw away a season of La Liga and the Champions League in order to get back to the sort of level that they see themselves in. And that's what champions should do.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.